right. Hey, it's Kyle. I'm one half of the Acadian Driftwood podcast. I just wanted to give a quick message before the podcast plays. I just wanted to say that Kendall and I went a little off the rails on what we intended on talking about. It's kind of a funny thing, even though we agree with each other on pretty much everything relating to actual policy issues, we always still end up being able to have a heated debate on something, and that's exactly what happened during this recording. We both thought it turned into a pretty interesting discussion regardless, and it shows a lot of the differences between us. I think on maybe even like a little bit more of a philosophical level, on some deeper philosophy. As I went back through it, I think we're sometimes talking about different things sometimes and just have different views on exactly what is currently happening in the current era. We both agreed to edit it down a bit because there were points that we began talking in circles a little bit, but nonetheless, we both really enjoyed the conversation. If we wanted to, we could have ended up talking about this for several more hours, honestly. But as always, if you like this dialogue, throw us a like and a subscription. We're still in that experimental phase of the podcast, and we're starting to test various things out. After we're out of what I see as a kind of a beta phase for the podcast, we'll start pushing this onto various platforms, not just YouTube. YouTube's just kind of a training ground for us as we're kind of learning what we're doing. Soon we'll probably begin asking some of the people within our own personal networks from our various political backgrounds, because both of us have a lot of experience in the political world. And we'll probably begin pushing this podcast out much harder once we kind of get into that phase. There's still a few things that we have to fix in terms of various quality controls, but as always, both of us we're doing our part to try to promote peace and prosperity through kind of a healthy dialogue here. With that, I hope you enjoy the show and this kind of heated debate that we both got ourselves into. Bye, guys. There's been a lot that's happened this week, Kendall. How's it going? How's it going for you? We haven't recorded since the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's right. No, it's been going great. Honestly, there's been just a lot moving at the national level. I mean, if you're even, you've seen some kind of news come out of Washington. So there's definitely a lot to talk about.
Oh, yeah, no. Yeah, it's definitely been an exciting week, especially because we got Trump getting acquitted. We got his crazy speech. Crazy. It was an interesting speech. It was a fun speech, kind of. And then we got the Iowa caucuses and New Hampshire that have come in, the crazy Iowa caucuses. What were your kind of overall thoughts on everything that we saw? Were they what you expected?
Yeah, I definitely expected a Sanders victory in Iowa. That was definitely something I anticipated as an observer. But I personally, I did not know that Mayor Pete was going to be somebody who's so competitive. It's really interesting, and I'm not really sure what's driving that. Actually, I didn't know that he was resonated so well with kind of the voices in the Democratic Party who are still looking for a more moderate kind of establishment representative, and that's kind of what he embodies for a lot of Democratic voters. So, yeah, I didn't know that he was kind of taking up that mantle. I definitely thought that it'd be a Joe Biden versus Bernie Sanders type of race. I definitely expected Klobuchar to do well in Iowa, but I did not expect her to be doing so well in New Hampshire. And that's definitely an interesting storyline here in this race as well.
Yeah, and I've been saying this kind of among our group of friends for a while now, that I always thought Bernie was the main contender, and it always just kind of depended on who ended up being the establishment pick. And for a while, I've been thinking that was Pete. Mainly because Biden has been kind of falling apart, largely with a lot of his gaffes. Although I think Biden is going to do very well in places like South Carolina. But I do kind of think the top two contenders in this race are going to be Bernie and Mayor Pete. And it's usually because these things usually come down to you have like the passionate ideologue or the populist and the establishment candidate. And those that usually end up being the ones duking it out in the end in a one-on-one race.
Right. Well, and I think for our viewers too. I mean, this is my prediction, but I think that you could expect Elizabeth Warren to definitely be working towards dropping out in the near future, because she has been canceling ads left and right. She's been
Yeah.
restructuring her organization. She's had abysmal performances in the first two states, and really, I don't see a path forward for her in terms of crowding out Bernie as the progressive kind of left wing voice for the populist left. So I don't see that happening for her. And I think that things are on the downhill trend for her.
Well, and the interesting thing is that she's been on a downhill trend since she released her economic plan. Like that's really like the beginnings of her just starting to plummet in the polls, at least as far as I can tell.
What's funny is that actually, like, she was obviously trended down for a long time, but
it's been like 2 months of plummeting.
Right. It really started accelerating actually right kind of in the situation that you and I commented on in one of our first podcasts.
Our first episode. Yeah.
Exactly. So when she started going after Bernie, all of a sudden, and our analysis during that time was that she's going after Bernie because she thinks that she can pick up some of his supporters. And I think that was a gamble that didn't pay off for her based upon her support now and kind of the state of her race.
Well, yeah, and I think that we're seeing like two dynamics that are forming on the progressive left, those outside the establishment left, like Mayor Pete and Biden, is that we're seeing there's like the economic democratic socialism thing that is largely manifested in Bernie Sanders, and then we're seeing like the social justice intersectional progressive types that manifest in Elizabeth Warren. But I think a lot of those Elizabeth Warren people, they like Bernie, and it's just a lot of the Bernie people don't like Warren. And and the stunt that she pulled ended up just being like everybody's just kind of like, let's head over to Bernie. And I think a lot of her supporters are going there. And I think we're going to see just Bernie continue to being the number one guy up until the convention in most of these states.
Yeah, I think the unknown factor here is Bloomberg, because he's been obviously spending a ton of money in the states past the first four. It's an interesting strategy. It's one that hasn't really been done before, as far as focusing on later election states. Usually the strategy is to try and pick up momentum through Iowa, through New Hampshire and South Carolina, those first voting states. But he's banking his time and money on the states that give him the most delegates. So I actually think it's a really smart strategy. So I think that's definitely the kind of the wild card factor here. If he picks up a lot of support, who knows where that will go.
Well, and I think this is going to come down to a contested convention. I don't see any way like the establishment types and the amount of money that Bloomberg is flooding into the DNC right now as well is like they're going to try and kind of do whatever they can to make sure that Bernie Sanders is not the nominee. And whether or not that goes to someone like Pete or Bloomberg, we'll see. It's going to be interesting. It's going to lead to an interesting convention regardless. Like you're going to have a lot of these Bernie or bust people that are going to there's going to be riots. It's going to be wild.
Yeah, I mean, there's a higher probability now that it's going to be a contested convention after we've gotten through the first two primaries. There's definitely a higher probability, but I think some of our viewers may have picked up on this, by now. But I definitely have disagreement with Kyle in the sense that I don't think that there's like this giant apparatus intentionally trying to take the election away from Bernie. I think that it's all it's all unintentional, and there's people just responding to incentives in the democratic system structure that's already set up that are resistant to populist outsiders taking hold of the party. I just think that's how it works. I don't think there's any grand conspiracy. Well,
I'm not saying that this is like a grand conspiracy of sorts. It's just like what do you call what happened in 2016, where you have like leaked debate questions being given to Hillary Clinton? You have people that definitely work together to be able to maintain their hold on power, and there are the people that are definitely seen as the establishment managerial types within government. They're like a clique that works together. Is it this big grand apparatus? I mean, you tell me what the DNC is. It's a big apparatus. You have people like Tulsi Gabbard that left the DNC as like the vice chair in 2016 after what they did to Bernie, and she's been very vocal about it, and it's why she was enemy number one.
But here's kind of my problem, I guess, with that kind of line of reasoning, kind of the populist sentiment, is this idea that like that kind of like the coziness and the like institutionalization is a problem in and of itself. And I don't think it necessarily is, because if the people that you agreed with were at the top of those institutions, then there wouldn't be a problem because they're getting stuff done. But the problem is that it's people we disagree with.
Well, and
a lot of people disagree with.
Wouldn't you say that people of our ideology are people that are definitely outside that coziness? Like, we're both people that operate relatively on the fringe. Like, we're not accepted by mainstream allowable opinion. Wouldn't you see that as a barrier to any victory theory for somebody believing in like has a strong belief in liberty?
No, I don't think I don't think it's a barrier to victory. I guess what I'm trying to say is that if somebody thinks that like destroying the institutions is going to allow them to advance their causes, I think they're wrong. I think obviously we need to find ways to build more or to find institutions or build new institutions that are more conducive to outsider or non-mainstream messages and issues. But the opposition to institutions themselves is not going to get anything done.
But you're making like a creative destruction argument, right?
Right, but I think that a lot of people are focusing on the destruction and they're not thinking about the creation.
Yeah, but like, as people that believe in maximizing liberty, don't you see these institutions as barriers to liberty? Is big bureaucratic monoliths a good system that we should uphold? Should we not be trying to introduce more and more chaos into that system to be able to break down what is obviously a gigantic barrier? Like the people in these institutions don't believe in the same things that we do. There's no dignity in these institutions. I think that a lot of the belief in these institutions are really just a religious mentality of like, we need to have these institutions secured. I don't see them as helpful.
That's a symptom. It's not a feature of the system. You know what I'm saying?
I would call it a bug in the system.
Yeah, but if that's the case, like, why even? So
actually, I take that back. Like, I wouldn't call it a bug. I think it's very, very much a feature, and just because it's a feature doesn't make it good. Like, it might. Yeah.
So populist movements have to ask themselves a question: if it is in fact the case that institutions are systemically flawed, and anytime that you have actors within those institutions, they're going to trend towards bad things and cronyism and the bad things that we've seen with crowding out outsiders and that sort of thing. If that is the case, then the populist movement is not there's no point in having a populist movement, because if you take over the government, then it's still the government. So it's still going to be this cronyist, bureaucratic mess.
Yeah, that sounds like a very good argument for destroying these institutions. like that's the kind of the problem with these institutions is that they are a corrupting factor. And this is where I disagree with, and we have a clip queued up with an interview of Steve Bannon and Bill Maher. This is where I disagree with people like Steve Bannon or the populists, like, which he is a populist, but or the populists like Bernie Sanders or the MAGA populist, is like, there's this inherent idea that they have. It's just like, well, if we just control the system, everything's going to be better. It's like, and no, the problem is the system. The system is flawed. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, these systems are naturally corrupting themselves. Like, we started from having the smallest government in the world to now we have the largest government if you look at budgetary reasons, like if you're describing it through the budget, and just military power and blah blah blah. Like, it doesn't change, but like I'm kind of wondering, is like, why are you so attached to these systems, I guess, like these institutions? Like, I see as like exposing the systems for what they are, which are these big monoliths. They're kind of like that have like religious sentiment behind them. Like how is that help? Like, what is the like value in them, I guess, in your eyes?
I'm not making a claim to value of the institutions. What I'm saying is I'm pointing out the cognitive dissonance of populist movements. So populist movements have this intense criticism of institutions, but the problem is that, like, they're leading in the direction of institutionalization. So they get populist movements get organized, and they vote in rebel Tea Party leaders, I guess, in the Tea Party wave in 2010 into the government to make a change. And then what happens? Now they're sitting in committee leadership, and they're not changing anything. And so I think there's a bit of cognitive dissonance with populist movements. And I think that the effort shouldn't be spent so much on criticizing the institutions as actually building the alternatives.
Well, I definitely agree with building the alternatives, but like I'm feeling a little dissonance in what you're saying here, where it's like, okay, yeah, like the problem here is like, yeah, you have all these, like, in 2010 you had all these Tea Party people rise up, and they got involved, and they became elected, they became part of these institutions and stuff like that, and then like literally nothing changed, and that itself shows a major flaw if you are somebody that believes in like a libertarian type of solution in decentralization and stuff like that. Like, it enhances the argument that like these things need to be decentralized.
Well, and I think the other part of the cognitive dissonance that I'm talking about too is that, so populist movement, especially the populist movements right now that probably will be discussed in this clip that we're going to watch, is the populist the populist anger is about government dysfunction, and they're like, oh, the government's not getting anything done, and so we need people who are outsiders, who aren't government bureaucrats, who are going to go in and do something, and
which is what we saw in 2016.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, like Trump wasn't really necessarily about like any policies per se. It was more so about a culture war and a big FU to all the people that like all these people that voted for him felt like they've been lied to, and they have been lied to. Like, all of these people, politicians lie to people. That's the nature of the game.
But here's the thing though. Like, if populist movements think that they can elect people to get things done who are populists, they're sorely mistaken, because as we've discussed before, the time in over history that things have gotten done the most was when there was the least amount of populism, when there was essentially the two parties looked about the same.
Well, so I think that we have a very different view on what's actually, like, what's going on in the current cultural dynamic within politics, because I very much so, despite my many disagreements, I disagree with Bernie Sanders on like 90% of things, pretty much all economics, which is his main message. But I almost welcome the Bernie Sanders phenomenon in the same way that, like, I disagree with Trump on many things, but I welcome the Trump phenomenon. I agree with Trump on more than I do Bernie, but I disagree with him on many things. But I kind of welcome the Trump phenomenon as well, because I see very much that what is happening right now is there's like a two-front war on the managerial state, on the bureaucrats, on these institutionalized unelected officials. And that's what both the Trump phenomenon and the Bernie phenomenon represent in a lot of ways, is that they're taking a war from two different sides and attacking on those people.
Right, but it's not going to accomplish anything. Like, you're just going to tear down the institutions, and then what?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of then what? That could be a lot of different things.
Yeah, but that just seems very misguided, in my opinion. I mean, why don't you build the alternatives and create, you know, the great framework, you know, put forward the idea of like voice and exit, you know, like when you're under an oppressive regime, there's kind of two options for you, and that's or three options, I guess. That's either to work within the system, if it's functional enough. If it's not functional, then you can voice your concerns, and if you're and persuade people towards change. So resistant that your voice doesn't matter, then exit and leave.
Well, yeah, no, and I agree. Like, that's my mentality, is exit and leave. But we're talking about like a monopoly on force that exists on an entire populace of 350 million people. It's just like, like what are you suggesting? Like, we're talking about things like the deep state and the unelected officials and all these institutions that have been built up over time. Like, are you suggesting we just build a new system, like, right alongside it, when you have, like, and we just don't pay attention to what's going on in this battle? Like, is that what you're suggesting?
No, I'm not suggesting that, but I'm saying if you're a, you know, motivated young person who's caught up in these populist movements, don't kid yourself in thinking that if you vote for, you know, the person you agree with for president, that they're going to accomplish all of your populist missions.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. Like people spend too much intellectual energy and passion on politics, in my opinion. As somebody, as both of us are political animals, we are obsessed with this game in a lot of ways. But I think that too much money is focused on politics. I think that too much energy, like, think of all the amazing things that could be accomplished if all the money spent on politics was actually spent out in the real world, instead of like on campaign ads and all that stuff. But it's kind of the system that we also have, and it's just like, if you just don't spend any time in there, then you're just going to let the other guys win. There's also that dynamic. I'm personally somebody that is very much yes, let's exit. Like, I voted for Harambe, like the monkey that died in the Cincinnati Zoo. That was who I voted for in 2016. Like, I think the whole thing is ridiculous. Like, I think the whole system is inherently flawed. But it's just like, I do enjoy, and I think that there is benefit out of, regardless of what we think about populism, I think that there's benefit on these people exposing the system for what it is.
Sure.
And that's the biggest thing that I see in the Trump era, is that, like, sure, Trump is kind of cartoonish in a lot of ways, but kind of what he does is he just kind of holds up a mirror and exposes everything for what it is. Right. Because he's very authentic in a lot of ways too.
Yeah, but I mean, if we elect a bunch of populists to Congress, like, they're not going to get anything done. And like, the reason being is because you don't elect populists if you want something done. You elect populists if you want gridlock and the system to collapse in on itself.
But as a libertarian, isn't that what you want? You want gridlock. You don't want the government continually expanding things. Like the chaos is kind of what we want. Like, we don't want just continual growth of these institutions.
Right, but I'm not so concerned about what it does to the institutional state. I'm concerned about what it's doing for the people caught up in these movements. You know, they're putting a lot of their belief systems and a lot of their intellectual energy into the mindset that if they out organize the other side, the other populist, you know, faction, and they advance their cause and everything like that within, you know, this specific framework, then they're going to accomplish something. And it's like, I think that people really need to take a step back and say that no, what really accomplishes things is building alternatives and then building consensus as well. And you don't build consensus by being a populist. You build consensus by being a deal maker, somebody who's bent towards compromise, being a leader.
See, that's where I disagree with you. Compromise is how we got to this state that we're at right now. Like all the worst things happen with compromise. Like this is.
But how are you ever going to build the future? So if you crush the entire system, you're going to need people who are willing to compromise and willing to be deal makers, and to create the next institutions that are going to lead us 1,000 years down the road. And that's not in any of these people's minds who are super populist. They're just like, tear it down, and we need to keep the radicalization going. And so I don't think that the people that they're trying to promote, or the mindset that they're trying to promote, is not the mindset that is going to lead to social cohesion in the future.
Well, I see. I don't see social cohesion as this major value. I think that's one of the biggest things that we have. Like I think like. What? I think social, like this belief in widespread social cohesion, and that everybody just has to get along and everybody should just get along is like a big fallacy, and it's not going to happen. I think that's like a utopian vision of the world.
That's the beauty of trade, man. It allowed people
so like that's what brings cohesion, but it brings cohesion between different groups of people. It doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has to get along. It's just like they're making economic trades. With one another, and that creates peace. But like having these widespread institutions that everybody kind of congregates around, like that is not going to bring cohesion. Like that's my critique. Is like I feel like there's some sentiment and I'm not like, I don't want to like say what's going on in your mind, but like I feel like there's a little bit of a sentiment towards like having kind of like a central figure or a central force that everybody kind of crowds around. And I see as like, it's, if we decentralize away from these forces, then that is what's going to bring about the most peace in the world, because then everybody can just kind of do their own thing and join the groups that they want to join and all that stuff. Like we should be able to secede from these. There's no merit in like all of us kind of grouping around common values, because people have different common values. Nobody's going to have the same values.
Right, but that's not the mindset that's going to lead to the formation of groups that people can associate with. Like, you need people who are bent towards compromise, who want to bring people together, who don't have a populist mindset. They have a pragmatic mindset. The types of mindsets and individuals who build companies, make trade agreements, form peace treaties, like all that kind of stuff. Populists are tribal and they're factionalized, and they're not oriented towards working with others.
See, this is kind of where I see like fallacy in the mindset, because I think that there's also a very tribal attitude that is in this idea that kind of like, oh, we're just going to be the pragmatic people. Like that is what the managerial state's whole attitude is that we're the pragmatists. Like we're not dealing with these radical ideologues on the fringes. We're just the people in the middle that make sure that we have good government, we have good and we're bringing forward like the poor is everybody's going to equalize, and we're just going to have like this strong, steady, we're the rock of society. Like, and that is a very tribal religious attitude in my estimation.
But if you do a historical analysis and you look at all of the innovation, all of the different flourishing time periods in human history, it's when we've been the most cohesive. It's not when we've been the most tribalistic or factionalized or populist.
I don't know. I feel like you're using certain words, and we're meaning different things by words. Like, and like we're gonna end up talking into a bunch of circles because of this. But like, so like, yeah, we'll maybe kind of like leave it there. But like, yeah, because like I agree with you on elements, but I think that there's like certain things that we're just kind of viewing the world in very different capacities, because like all the innovation usually in my mind comes at the most chaotic times. That's when the most innovation happens.
Well, but okay, just to clarify real quick before we move on. I mean, my view isn't that there can't be creative destruction and innovation and that sort of thing. It's like the social cohesion allows for creative environment, right? It's like if you have the opposite of cohesion, if you have social disorder, you're not going to have environments that are conducive to people creating new things. And so you have to have a somewhat cohesive environment that isn't too restrictive on liberties and rights and creation and innovation, so that it creates stability enough for that innovation to occur.
See, so I may have misspoke about my exact view of the social cohesion thing, because I agree, like everybody kind of getting along is very useful, but like what I'm saying is that you have like decentralized social cohesion. It's just like these people that get along as a community are useful in like a decentralized manner, and then they're able to trade with other communities, but like all those communities, if they were to just like live together, might not get along. You know what I mean?
But I think
so there's cohesion on the macro level, but then you have like micro cohesions, if that makes sense.
And I think that I think that what that leads into is, I mean, I think that you're looking, when I say institutions and I say like social cohesion, I think you're thinking of like a church or a government, and like those are the kind of institutions I'm talking about. I'm talking about economies. I'm talking about markets. I'm talking about like just hierarchies in general, and those are the things that the populists right now are bent on destroying. And
but I think that because we both agree hierarchies are a natural order. Like hierarchies happen naturally. You have people that rise to the top of any given like system. I think you're giving a little bit too much credence to all hierarchies. Like I think that there's a hierarchy of hierarchies, if that makes sense, which sounds very meta. It doesn't mean that all hierarchies are good. Like some hierarchies deserve to be destroyed.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that all are good. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But what I am saying is that you have to be like you have to. You can't tear down institutions and that be your only mode of operating. Like you have got to be bent towards social cohesion and cohesion that is centered around your values, right? Like
but here's the thing. Because like the status quo, where the status quo is really what these populist figures are attacking right now, is that they're upset about some aspect of the status quo, and that's what the managerial state. That's what my preferred way of describing them. These people that are like the quote unquote moderate statesman type of people. They're very much like the keepers of the status quo. That's what they're pushing for, is just kind of like maintaining the norm. They don't want to have too much socialism. They don't want to have too much capitalism. They want like a healthy dose in between.
Disagree. I disagree. They're not even ideological.
Yeah, and I agree, because the reason why they think that is because they're not ideologues. Like they see like a very they're not ideologues in that sense. They're ideologues when it comes to power. They have very specific ideas on power, and in that sense, they are very much ideologues.
So, for example, Mitch McConnell's only focus is maintaining his hegemony in the Senate.
Yes, 100%.
The only thing he wants to do. Any policy that he passes is bent towards that end. And is that a bad thing? I don't think so. He's operating as the institution is intended. And the only reason that people have an objection to that is because he's doing stuff that they don't want him to do. And I
agree with that.
And so it's just like all these populists are just like, these moderates and these people who want to compromise and all this kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, but you need to be prepared to compromise too if you ever want to get anything done. Yeah,
but like, so this is what I meant by on the compromise thing that I was saying earlier, is that the history of the last 100 years is progressives and conservatives, mainly the old right, coming together and being like, and the progressives being like, I want 10% of my thing, and the conservatives being like, how about we settle on 5%? And then the next time they come around, the progressives are like, I want 15%. And then the conservatives are like, no, let's settle on 10%. And you just continually build and build and build off of compromise, quote unquote. Like that's not like real compromise. That like nobody's getting what they, or I shouldn't say nobody, like one side is not getting what they're wanting in that. And that's kind of like that's where I see the flaws of conservatism.
Right, but populism doesn't solve that.
Yeah, but like as people that believe in very much limiting the size of the state, is like neither does just these institutions and this managerial side either. Like I don't think any of these are really solving the problem. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, exactly, because like, we don't want to operate within the current framework, right? Like, so we want to.
Yeah, the framework's bad. The framework's bad, and I think very much like I'm very much like on board team. Let's operate outside the framework and let's let these chaotic forces like populism and stuff like that disrupt that framework as much as possible.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, if I'm there's one restaurant in town and I hate it. It's horrible service there, horrible food, and there's a monopoly and there's no other entrance to the market. We can lead a populist revolution and just be really pissed off at the management of the restaurant, or we can learn to cook ourselves and work towards compromise, build a cohesive, movement around building a new restaurant.
Well, and I agree, and it's why I conduct almost all of my transactions through like cryptocurrency and things like that. Like I'm very much outside of our monetary system in a lot of ways. Like
right, but that's why I get very concerned with people who stoke populism, because they're not. Oh, my cat's scratching. That's funny. Because they're not fueling energy in the right direction. They're fueling energy like just. It's like complaining, but nothing gets done. Why don't we focus on people who have particular radical viewpoints or outside the mainstream viewpoints? Instead of focusing on populist outrage, why don't you focus on like building something with your life and building kind of cohesion around your values? So like build a family or have a bunch of friends, build a large friend group, become a pillar of your community. And that's how change will start to happen. I mean, it doesn't.
I mean, in a vacuum, that sounds great, but like that's not the paradigm that we're existing in right now. Is like we have so much money and so much energy going to politics right now. You can't just change that. Like you can't just change the dynamic of what's happening. Is like this is the common thing of empire always, is that empire always comes up to this point where then you just end up having radical populist messianic figures that we bounce between until everything kind of comes crashing down.
Yeah,
and we have new systems that develop.
So really, like, should we buy into something that's not going to make us fulfilled? I'm talking about populism. Populism is not going to make people fulfilled. It's going to make people resentful and angry, and it's not going to get anything meaningful accomplished. So what is the good in that? There is no good in populism.
But like also there's no good in just allowing things to remain the same as well. Is like
so that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree. Build things on the side, but we're also talking about like the largest state apparatus that's ever existed in history. Like we're also talking about that, and that is a major hindrance to people, to radical freedom lovers and individualists and people that want to build things. That is a major hindrance to their capability of actually doing that.
Yeah, exactly. But but that's what I'm saying. But like, you aren't going to change that by just being really pissed off. You're going to change that by being by basically maximizing your potential, and your potential is maximized through basically building your capacity for social cohesion and the amount of people that you can kind of like coordinate with and build off of. I mean, that's something that is like fundamental toward to long-term change. Populist change can topple, they can bring revolutions and they can topple governments, but really the way that we build a long-term change in our society is by people focusing on building their capacity for cohesion and building their own personal, focusing on their own personal development.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think I'm just way more cynical than you. I see that as a very utopian framework that I just kind of disagree with.
I view it as a Jordan Peterson framework myself. I think that that's probably what he'd probably be on my side. I'd love to speak for him. So.
Well, yeah, no, and that's probably accurate. It's something that I disagree with him on, actually. Like I'm much more. I don't see much value in kind of those things that are being purported right there. Like they're good things. And I just think it's kind of naive in a lot of ways. That's going to be how things kind of just end up. Like we're dealing with a lot of variables here, and I think that like yes, promoting that everybody gets along is useful, but like I'm not really sure exactly what that means in the framework that you're kind of building here. I don't really fully understand how, like, some of these pieces seem disconnected. I guess that's kind of how I'm viewing it. But let's not beat a dead horse on that one, because we're gonna have some of those topics that come up. Because I saw this weekend, that popped up in my YouTube feed was Bill Maher interviewing Steve Bannon, who, and this kind of in a lot of ways shows kind of the dynamic that we're talking about right now and what's going on in the political party. It's
exactly the conversation that Kyle and I have been having here. It's kind of this idea of like populism versus what is the opposite of populism? What is the term for what I was talking about? I don't know.
Well, it's also like I kind of worry that we're just like throwing around this word populism in kind of like too willy-nilly, because like populism itself really just means like it's a movement that is of the people. Like it's just kind of like a bland term that describes that. That takes in like public sentiment. It's really like kind of like a democracy, like that fantasy word that everybody throws around, that everybody has one person, one vote, democracy. Like it's one of those words that doesn't really even have that much meaning, really. Like that people put a lot of religious sentiment, in my opinion, around. But Bill Maher being kind of establishment Democrat figure, like I think that's where he endorsed Klobuchar, or at least he said he's expressed like really strong sentiments towards her. And then Steve Bannon, who was Donald Trump's political strategist in 2016, probably one of the major reasons that Donald Trump was elected, like probably one of the major figures that are like helped him capture what he did and was the beginnings of this era. I think had a really interesting conversation, and I think that we might both be on different sides on this, actually, which is not what I was expecting when I kind of threw this video at you last night. I
think that this is great for our viewers to see too. It encapsulates, what Kyle and I were really an encapsulation of kind of the debate in our country right now.
Yes, and I also think it shows a major thing that the Democrats had not really learned their lesson of 2016. At least a lot of the Democrats, the people kind of on Bill Maher's side, I think they blame things that they're not really understanding, like the entire dynamic of what's going on. But yeah, no, I have it queued up. We will kind of cut and pause where we feel like we need to when we want to insert our 2 cents. So here's that video.
He's Trump's former White House chief strategist and the co-host of the War Room Impeachment and War Room Pandemic podcasts. Steve Bannon has agreed to come by again. Brave man, Steve. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for being polite. Okay, Steve, so look, I'm not going to lie about it. Your boy had the best week so far, don't you think?
Well, his last 2 weeks. I think you see the culmination.
All right, I admitted it. Don't gloat.
No, but I think this shows you the actions he's been taking the entire time. It's not just the impeachment. It's the Middle East peace plan. It's what he's doing on opioids. It's USMCA. It's Brexit. One action after another.
Okay, but Steve, as a student of history, which I know you are, nothing this week bothered you? Like yesterday when we find out now that he's you know, the thing he said about Comey, we'll see what happens. If it was Obama, people would be in jail. Vindeman gets frog marched out. Mitt Romney is a suppressive person. This is very von Stauffenberg, isn't it? After the coup failed.
Here, pause right here.
You don't think it's an enemy's list?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to pause on too.
Yeah, I think that this is interesting. Because, I mean, basically it, you know, at least at this point in Bill Maher's argument here, you know, he's kind of expressing like what I'm talking about, where, you know, his main concern, and I think the main concern of a lot of these more establishment kind of institutional, you know, voices on the left is not that he necessarily does the wrong things or whatever as far as policies, but it's that he sounds bad and he is not somebody who wants to compromise, and he's like he's viewed as a bully and things like that. That's their main points of contention, versus, you know, people on the populist side of things will say that they'll say those same things, but they'll obviously characterize, they'll make a caricature of them and kind of like that up, and then they'll also criticize his policies.
Well,
there.
And speaking of the caricature, like he's comparing this whole phenomenon to wow, I'm blanking on his name, the German guy, von Stauffenberg. Von Stauffenberg was the guy that tried to assassinate Hitler and having a coup against Hitler, and he's comparing these people that are standing up to Trump with them, or with him. So like you're already putting this framework that Trump is Hitler on here, and like these people don't want to compromise with Trump either. Like I think that this is kind of like these are political games being played. This isn't about like compromise and social cohesion and things like that. Is like, I'm adjusting my light because I'm getting dark, because it's getting dark outside. But this isn't this isn't about social cohesion. Like these two elements hate each other. Like there's no compromise that's happening here.
My estimation, and you know, you can disagree with this, I'm sure, but I think that has been fueled by populism, and it's not the result of people who are bent on like compromise and getting things done and that sort of thing. So, you know, you can see that this, I think a good example of this is like Nancy Pelosi was very resistant to this idea of impeachment, because, you know, she knew that was going to be a big barrier for her to kind of horse trading and getting kind of the democratic things done that she wanted to do with Mitch McConnell and the president. And so, yeah, I just think that it's been this type of sentiment towards Trump is the result of populism, and it's going to
but also remember, like, because like you also have the instance Nancy Pelosi ripping out the State of the Union address. Like you have like all of these figures that Bill Maher is going to go on to say, like Bill Maher's going to go on to say that like now Trump just has loyalists around him. It's like, no, all these people around him, they were vehemently opposed to him in 2016. You think that they're just all of a sudden on board with Trump now? Like, no.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I mean, there's certainly cultural diffusion that happens, right? So like populist sentiment can diffuse into the ranks of the institutionalists. Absolutely. And obviously institutionalists have to be responsive to kind of populist demands in order to keep their power. So obviously, like they can shift the Overton window of acceptable action and acceptable policies. You know, populism can do that. Populism itself will never accomplish anything, because you need those people who are bent towards compromise and cohesion to actually get things done.
I think you give these people in the institutions too much credit. I think that's where
I know the people in the institutions.
Yeah, so do I. I've met many of the people in the institutions as well. It's like, yeah. I think that you're giving them way too much credit. Like I'm so much more cynical on these people than you are. Like, and it's like, it's not necessarily that these guys are like bad. It's not necessarily that it's not necessarily that these people are like bad people per se. Like they have different views of government than I do, but like I think that you're giving them way too much credit as kind of like these stalwart defenders of these institutions. Like these people are power brokers. Like this is what it is, and I think that they're a detriment to people of our persuasion.
I just think that it's wrong to criticize power brokers if we're going to need power brokers in the future, you know?
Yeah, but like, because like, so like, as an example, you have Trump's deep state, like, or like, sorry, Trump's drain the swamp attitude, right? Like, you have that, like that was very much a message of draining out these power brokers, draining out the deep state, draining out, you know, like these institutionalized bureaucrats. Like that was something that like the momentum behind Trump was very on board with, because they're fed up with the status quo. Like I'm just kind of shocked that I shouldn't say shocked, because we've had this conversation before offline. But like I find it so strange that like that we're on opposite sides of kind of like our opinions of this phenomenon that exists.
It's kind of funny, yeah. Well, but I'm coming at this from a political science perspective, and I think that when political science looks back on the Trump presidency, they're going to view it as a disjunctive presidency. So just
I agree with that. Like he's a transformative figure. I agree with that.
Right. Yeah. And you know, so like Jimmy Carter is another good example of a disjunctive president. Jimmy Carter was elected on a populist wave. He was not a politician. He was not a Washington insider by any means.
He was kind of a politician before. He was very politically active. Like he wasn't like a politician, but he was very politically active.
Right. He was less. Yeah. But he was not an institutionalist by any means. A Washington institutionalist. So he gets in there. And he can't get anything done.
A little bit, but
but he can't get anything done because he has no relationships built with or carried over into the White House with existing senators and the existing power brokers there, and so his presidency is known for failing to actually address a lot of the serious policy issues at play during the 70s. And
Jimmy Carter not being able to get anything done is a great thing. Like, because he was terrible. Like we don't want him to get anything done. That's kind of like my attitude of it.
Yeah, but when we have somebody in there who agrees with us, who wants to roll back regulations and barriers to work and opportunity, like they're gonna have some relationships to get that done. And I just want to elect a populist who has no relationships. We're gonna get nothing done.
I have something to say about that, but there's a point in the video where they talk about that, so I'll save it until that point. Yeah.
Well, I guess let's keep rolling this video.
Because I have something. There's a dynamic between Maher and Bannon later on that is basically that. So we'll talk about that then.
This kind of situation that doesn't make you a little nervous? You trust him with that power?
No, absolutely. In fact, here's what I've argued from day one. We should have had a longer impeachment. We should have had Bolton. You should have had Mulvaney. You should have had all the OMB memos. Witnesses. Let them get crossed. But we get the whistleblower. We get the second whistleblower. We get Schiff as a fact witness. Let's get it all out. If this is not, and Trump says this, it's just not about Trump. This is about going forward the office of the president. If Bernie gets in and you're his advisor, trust me, the same thing's going to happen. If you think the neoliberal, neocon, national security apparatus is just going to sit there and let Bernie as commander-in-chief make the decisions that he's empowered to as commander-in-chief, they're going to fight him every step of the way, and that's why this thing has to be vetted. The abuses of the
because that's kind of what that kind of goes in that element of like. So, like, it doesn't matter, like, you know, say we're both fans of Ron Paul, right? Like, the institution would not let Ron Paul get anything done. Like just honest, Ron Paul would have gotten zero done in his presidency. Even though we completely agree with kind of, like, his economic, like, views and all that stuff. And Bernie will not get anything done. Like, there might be some push for a little bit more government growth in various areas. He's not going to get his Medicare for all, you know, like he's not going to get that stuff. But like, that's kind of the big thing is that these institutions, it doesn't matter. Like if you're outside of the allowable opinion right now, like you're not going to get anything done no matter where you are. Like there's not going to be that much allyship and alliances that are going to be built around being able to get what we view as good done, which is limiting the size and scope of the state. Like these people don't have the incentive to limit the size and scope of the state because they are the size and the scope of the state.
Right. Yeah, but I mean, you can look at a lot of the successes in our category over the past few years. A good example is criminal justice reform, the major steps, the First Step Act, the major reform that President Trump was able to sign on to with bipartisan support. That wasn't done by populists, man. It was done by people who are willing to work with the other side and to build relationships, long-term relationships that they needed to get something done, and convince and persuade. And it took a lot of people who weren't just like populist activists on the street. It was people who were
this is I think this is the problem. I feel like you're using the word populist too just fluently. You're just like everybody that isn't part of the establishment is just a populist. Like criminal justice reform is kind of done because like everyone pretty much agrees with it. Like it's become a cultural thing that like everybody over a long period of time people have been pushing for on both Democrat and Republican sides. Like it's something that like yes, there's been compromise on this. Yeah, okay.
So populists in my definition are people who refuse to operate inside the existing mechanisms or systems, and they voice their opposition from the outside. Whereas I think that kind of the opposite of that would be people who are willing to change and work towards compromise within a given system or within several different systems. I just looked up the definition of populism here real quickly, and so Webster defines it as populism is a political approach that strives to appeal to ordinary people who feel that their concerns are disregarded by established elite groups.
Okay, yeah. So maybe your definition is actually more accurate.
Well, I think we're both technically right. I mean,
yeah, both technically.
Yeah, because it's kind of funny because like, and this is the cognitive dissonance that I was talking. This politicians, I think, is an oxymoron. You know.
Say that again. You kind of cut out there.
I think populist politicians is kind of an oxymoron, you know?
Yeah, I kind of see it. Well, anything that's kind of like, anything in politics that's kind of like of and for the people is generally oxymoronic. Like, it's just, it's not how politics works. Like, it's not. Like, there's too many mechanisms in play in these broad state apparatus for that to be actually true.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, anyways, we'll move on with the video.
The FBI and the CIA in the 50s and 60s culminated in the Church Commission in the 70s. That's what we need today. I think the Senate Judiciary Committee ought to start calling witnesses. We got to get to the bottom of the 40 subpoenas that were out there by the House Intel. We've got to he ought to declassify this, Crossfire Hurricane, and let Bolton, let Mulvaney, let them all talk. Let's get all the emails out there. Let's see the whole thing.
Okay, when you say Crossfire Hurricane, the liberal audience doesn't have the decoder ring for that one. That's just Fox News. Yeah, I know.
It's an FBI. It's the FBI.
I know.
Right. But no, if they don't know it, they shouldn't. Listen, this is about
Steve had one too many Red Bulls.
Protecting the office of the president. Your audience should know that, and that's why it's got to be official apparatus.
Okay, Steve, I can't even. But
that's how I feel.
Yeah, see, like, and I think that's again, like, because, like, I think Steve brought up a lot of good points. Like, I think that he holds too much, like, we gotta, like, hold the dignity of the president or whatever. Like, I think that's kind of, like, a lame thing, but whatever. But, like, you have, this is kind of the element that I see is, like, most of the people that are kind of going against this is they're just like, oh, I can't even, like, you're just like that ends up being kind of the rebuttal oftentimes. It's just like, yeah, but, like, you just made all these good points, but, like, did you hear President Trump called people scum? And you're just like it doesn't mean anything. It's just like, okay, like the president uses like language that you use in your private life, but you're like unwilling to say in public life. Like, okay, like, you know, like that's kind of the dynamic there that I feel is like so disconnected from like the elites of society and like what's actually going on in the world.
Yeah, well, and just to be clear too, there's certainly problems that I see with people with a complete institutional mentality. You know, I absolutely see that. I criticize all the time, as you know, Kyle, the idea of kind of like professional technocrats in highly skilled, highly professional industries a lot of times are just like, well, if we put a doctor in charge of the country, and then healthcare would be fixed. And it's like, no, that's not how it works.
Doctors are the last people you want in charge of health insurance, because they never see the prices.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's it, but that's a criticism kind of centered on people who are institutionalists versus kind of the populist criticism. So I occupy somewhere in the center.
Yeah, I'm still at this kind of point where I feel like you're giving these people too much credit, and I agree with your sentiment there. Like, I agree with your criticism of it right there. I think that's enough to disregard a lot of the institutionalized forces. But yeah, we'll keep going.
Let's go back to history, because he used words like scum, horrible people, evil people.
He has a different house style.
Okay,
but he's right.
But we've seen, excuse me, we've seen this house style before. When you talk about people like that, when you're a cult leader like that who has millions of people, wait a second, he has millions of people who would obviously do anything for him, and now we only have loyalists in the government. Okay, so when
that's not true.
Well,
that's where people were terminated today. Many of the people on that list,
because they're just not loyalists, they're good people.
No, it's not loyalists. Remember, a commander-in-chief has the rights. The whistleblower and other guys like that were on the list that people that worked around me put together in April of 2017.
Steve.
These detailees, a commander-in-chief, whether it's Bernie Sanders, AOC, or Donald
Trump,
stop
this real quick.
Have the right to
let
have
them finish.
around them that believe in their policies and their program. It's not about loyalty.
Okay,
yeah.
These are people.
Yeah, what were you gonna say?
So what I was gonna say is that, I think this is a good example. So I think a lot of the resistance in the kind of the deep state, if you want to use Bannon's terms, a lot of the resistance from the deep state is coming from not necessarily because they're opposed to the populist policies that Trump espouses. I think it's because they're opposed to him just wanting to come in and slash and burn and do whatever. He hasn't built cohesion and trust, and so he hasn't worked within the system to do that, and so that's why a lot of these people resist him.
Yeah, well, they were resisting him since 2016. You had people calling for his impeachment before he actually entered office, when he was still president-elect.
Yeah, exactly. But if he had been CIA director before that, he probably would have been okay.
Well, and see, that's the exact problem right there, right? Because you have Bannon that is coming out and he's all about this. Like, you have CIA whistleblowers whistleblowing about things because he said mean things about the CIA. You're like when a CIA whistleblower comes out saying that you said mean things about the CIA and all this stuff, it's just like, you're not a whistleblower. Like that's just the CIA operating. But like, and Bill Maher takes the position, I'm not sure if it was here or he's about to say it, but he takes the position of like, yeah, but these deep state people are good people. He's giving too much credit to these people. Like, yeah. he's just like, but they're fighting, they're opposing the guy I don't like. So like, they're good people.
Wait, so you think they're evil people, Kyle? You think that they're evil people?
I mean, like, okay, people that lie us into committing genocide in other countries, that might hit the threshold of being evil policy making.
Okay, what about all the people who parrot that?
What do you mean?
Who don't know any better? So what about all the people who advocate that on the populist side?
Oh yeah, no, like, there's evil policies all around. I agree. Like Bernie Sanders' economic policies of widespread socialism is an incredibly dangerous policy. Like, it's been proven by history.
I think that this is something of a bias for you, and I guess I would criticize it. Obviously I understand where you're coming from. But...
So people that lie us into wars, that's not evil.
No, I don't. I especially don't think it's very bad from my point of view. But if you're coming at it from their perspective and their moral foundations,
did you read the Afghanistan papers?
They're trying to do the right thing.
Did you read the Afghanistan papers? It's like, like they had no idea what they were doing. Like, doing the right thing is like, no, that was not part of the framework. Like, Like, they had no idea what they were doing. And you have all this stuff going on with stuff like the petrodollar and just like all these dynamics between all these different states and just complete corruption in all of our foreign policy. It's just like,
but people aren't doing this because they have an evil plot or something. They're doing it because most of the time they want to do good, and they're trying to figure out the best way to do that.
Yeah.
And so I don't understand.
You're taking a very moral relativist. It's like, what's good to one person is bad. It might not be good to another person, but who are we to criticize that? It's like, I'm criticizing these policies. It's like one policy good, one policy bad, and it's just like, it's like that doesn't change that.
You can't say that these are bad people.
What?
Just because they have a different view of what policies would lead to good.
If somebody murders someone. If somebody murders someone and but they did it for, you know, good reasons, like they had good intentions for it, like they premeditated murder because they thought there might be a threat or something like that, but there really wasn't, they're just kind of justifying in their head, is that not a bad person? Like if he just goes out and premeditated murders somebody, it's like, I'm going to call that person for being a bad person because he just went out and murdered somebody. He caused aggression upon somebody.
So you're the type of person then who would be like yelling at a tax collector because they're part of the apparatus of the state and they're knowingly committing an evil act.
Those like not everybody knows that they're like most people subscribe to this religious mentality of the state, is that the state the state is this human rights organization. Is this like it doesn't necessarily mean that they're a bad person, but actions that they do are bad. And I'm going to call out, like I'm going to say that collecting taxes, committing theft upon people on a mass level is bad.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes,
that's bad.
Yes, exactly. Like lying us into wars is bad. And some of these people may do it because they believe what they're doing is moral. Some of these people might be doing it because they're doing it for profit. Some of these people, but like those actions are bad. I justify morality on actions.
Yeah, dude, but what did Jesus do? what did Jesus do?
What does that mean?
Think about it. In the Bible, how did he handle the tax collector? He didn't like pick up rocks with everybody else and be like, this guy's a horrible person, let's stone him. No, he said, hey, you know.
What? I'm not advocating us going and murdering deep state officials.
No, but
like I'm advocating criticizing it.
No, but what you are opposed to is the way that like, for example, Jesus operated and built consensus and built a movement. Like,
that's a very yeah, no, but and then the deep state, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, conspired with the Romans against him and to hang him on a cross because he was disrupting things, and he created a populist movement in the background. He was creating a populist movement, and the Sadducees and the Pharisees conspired with the Roman officials to get rid of this problem. Like, if you're going to use that example, that's the example. Like, I wasn't going to bring it in here.
That was a bad example. Yeah, but he was like, you know, his message of nonviolence and all that. It was focused on social cohesion. It was focused on loving your neighbor.
He was a disruptor. Like if we're going to use like people like a disruptor, but people like Jesus, people like Gandhi, people like these, you know, peaceful entities, they were disruptors that were going against the status quo.
Yeah, but
because the status quo was very violent.
Yeah,
and they were going against it.
But they were disruptors in a much different sense than modern populist movements. You know, they weren't complaining. They weren't just like finding every way to criticize the current institutions. They were just saying, look, there's a better way. This is how I'm going to do it. Follow me. You know, that's how Gandhi did it. They did it nonviolent resistance. And I think that those people are good examples for us to follow. They're examples of successfully channeling populist sentiment into constructive results. So like,
do you know what Jesus' end story was? He got killed by the establishment. Like,
yeah, but he led to a constructive result, man. I mean, he really channeled You know, I'm not familiar enough with that story to talk about it.
Oh, I am.
But like Gandhi or whatever, like he harnessed populist sentiment, right? Populist sentiment on itself doesn't do anything. Gandhi harnessed populist sentiment, and he said, okay, the way that we're going to make change is we're going to act in such a way that builds a movement, that brings more people to our side, and that gets key people within the government to change their opinion about us and to allow us to come into power, basically. And that's what Gandhi did. It's a theory. It's the theory of nonviolent resistance, and I think that populist people who are just populist for populist's sake are
but that's the thing. That's the thing.
They're stoked. We need to be open to the people who are bent towards compromise and bent towards getting something done and building cohesion, like those big leaders like Gandhi and Martin Luther King and all those people.
Yeah, but that's the thing, is like you're just saying that like you said, like populism for populism's sake is like nobody's a populist for just populist sake. Like they do it because they believe in something, like. Yeah, or they do at the time, at least in the short term. Like I think a lot of populists jump between movements and stuff like that. Yeah. But like
what I meant by that is just people who are outraged don't have any solution, or they're not aiming towards any solution.
Yeah, but like Trump's populist movement had solutions. Bernie's has solutions. Like they have things that they're advocating for with the change. They don't
have anything in between, right? So like during the 1960s. With the civil rights movement, you had black people being oppressed who wanted equal treatment, right? And there was populist outrage over here, but there was no way to get to their end result, right? Everything they were trying to do failed. Okay, so then you have Martin Luther King come in and say, okay, well, the way that we do this is we bring people to our side, and the way that we do that, acts of nonviolent resistance and like, you know, all the different stuff that they employed. To win politicians and influencers and celebrities and people like that to their side, and all of a sudden they built a movement and they got to Z. So like
I find MLK more as a populist than what you're describing.
The only reason populist movements have even ever been successful is because they've actually had institutionalists and people who were focused on building social cohesion harness their efforts.
Well, it's a numbers game. Like if you get if you get enough people that believe in Bernie's ideology into the institutions of power, is like then you are able to make mass change. Like if you get enough libertarians into institutions of power, you're going to be able to make mass change. Like it's a numbers game in our current system. And it's the same thing. It's like you get enough people believing in criminal justice reform, then you're going to get criminal justice reform change. You get enough people believing like that civil rights should be a thing, then you get civil rights changed. It's a numbers game, and populism is a tool to achieve that.
Yeah. So, but if you're in a populist movement right now, I think you should ask yourself, are you just a member of the movement, or are you modeling your behavior based upon a Martin Luther King or based upon a Gandhi?
I agree with that.
Then
because I don't think that populism is all good or all bad. I just see it as a tool.
Yeah.
But the way that you've been making it sound throughout the recording has been that like populism is pretty much just always bad and institutions kind of good, I guess. Like that's kind of how I've been feeling that you've been modeling your argument, I guess.
Yeah. I think that does no good.
Sorry, you cut out what does no good? What does no good?
I think populism does no good for individuals or for society or anything like that.
Populism, like, it was. Yeah, we're gonna be talking in circles because I feel like I've already criticized that argument.
I think just start playing the video.
Okay, we'll do that.
People who we didn't even know existed. They were deep state people. Deep state meaning competent people who actually make the government work, who are non-partisan.
I'm not a believer in the deep state.
Steve, let me get to question 2. Okay. Because we only have so much time. Okay.
Just quick, that's kind of what I was referencing right there. It's just like, is his attitude of like, just no, these are competent people. These are just people doing their jobs. Like, that's kind of what I was referencing. But
we've seen this in other countries. When you talk about people like they're scum and they're evil, we've seen it in Rwanda, cockroaches. We've seen it in Germany, vermin. You don't think that when you talk about people like that, your side, the people who hear those words, you don't think eventually it translates into action? They see people on our side
No, I do not.
as
okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, but like here's the problem with that. He was literally just creating a framework at the beginning of this video, calling Trump Hitler.
Yeah, well, see, that's where he's hypocritical, but no, he makes kind of a point that I was making, where we should be treating people with mutual respect and building social cohesion rather than being divisive and populist.
But here's also kind of the thing. If the other, because like I've been at events, like I've created events, I've like led events that where I had Antifa show up, calling me a Nazi, calling people that were with me a Nazi. It was a free speech event, and they came here and they came out to protest free speech. Like, when you have people that are like not willing to be reciprocal towards it, do we just accept it? Do we like I agree with the sentiment of like I would never start becoming violent against these people for this. Like I very much am kind of like a turn the other cheek type of guy in a lot of ways. But when we're talking about mass political movement, like what are the answers there? Like politics is a vicious sport. Like it's a blood sport in a lot of ways.
Yeah, not when you're an institutionalist though.
People have been going to jail over this stuff. You have people in Trump's space that have gone to jail for misremembering dates at court hearings. Like people's lives are getting ruined over this stuff.
No, what I meant by that is that like in the old not populist eras of our country, those political differences may have been solved over cocktails and a cigar, rather.
People used to duel each other.
They did that too, yeah, during more populist times. But
this is kind of the thing is like I have a much like lesser opinion of these people than you do, because like you have like there's plenty of instances like the FBI used to go around blackmailing presidents, like like J. Edgar Hoover used to go around blackmailing, like that's the deep state, that's the establishment. This a cross-dressing lunatic was going around blackmailing presidents. Like you had people getting thrown in jail for protesting World War I and World War II. It's like the whole idea, like on a free speech perspective of like you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, that came down because of a court decision because of a guy handing out pamphlets not to sign up for the draft for World War I. Like that's the reason for that. Is like people's lives get ruined over this stuff.
I'm very selective with who I call evil. I think there's a very, 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 very small percentage of people in history who fall under the evil category. I think that good people can do evil things, and good people can be caught up in groupthink and that can lead to bad outcomes. But most people are just trying to live and be a good person and to do right by their family. And I think that that's very misguided to say that there's all these just horrible people in the government who want nothing more than to, advance their own power games and all this kind of stuff.
You don't believe people are self-interested in that manner?
I believe people are self-interested. Yeah.
Yeah. Like you have every incentive to promote yourself in these power games. Like that's the most logical thing to do if you're just a power broker.
Sure. So that I don't understand why you're so outraged by them and what they do.
Because they do terrible things to people.
Yeah, that's great. So why don't we work with them to build some trust and change their mind?
Yeah, but like if you have a dissenting opinion towards them, like I don't know if changing their mind is going to do things. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but you could become very educated on the topics that they also work on, become an authority figure that works with them reciprocally.
Yeah, you might be able to work with them to a degree, and there's certain people that are just they view themselves as good statesmen and they're doing their job and stuff like that. But I don't view everyone in that category. I'm not collectively putting in there.
But I guess what I'm pointing to is something I view as a fatal conceit of populist movements is that they think they know better than people in these positions of power, and it's yeah, maybe they have better policy idea. They're behind better policy ideas than the people in power, but the fatal conceit is when that becomes conflated with thinking that the people in power aren't experts at what they do.
But I'll reverse that on you. These people in power also think that they know better than the people in these populist movements.
Yeah,
it goes both ways. It goes both ways.
I agree. But I mean, if you're
to be fair, I'm cynical of both sides of this. I want to be very clear. I'm not on the populist side of things. I'm cynical of both ends of this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that the populist stuff is somewhat healthy for the long term of society, even though it sucks in the short term.
I would agree with the inverse of that, but no, I mean it's the same thing, man. I mean it's the same thing with companies, with anything. It's unless you've done your homework, don't criticize, unless you can come in and build consensus and you actually know what you're talking about and you're willing to meet people on their level and talk with them, don't criticize. I mean, we can criticize the conceptual framework, but I would refrain from calling people evil if you hardly know them and what they do.
I'm not calling all these individuals evil. I'm calling actions that exist within the apparatus evil.
Yeah, I know, but I think that's something that a lot of populist movement people do all the time. They think that there's a grand conspiracy, that there's all these evil people working in the government, and they usually say that they're in a particular class or something like that, or they're a particular type of people, and they're that people that aren't like them, and they say they're making decisions that evil decisions that I would never make if I was in their position, and it's yeah, that's not right.
Oh, I agree with that. You often have the people that are. I agree with that aspect. I agree with the second half of that.
That's what I mean. Mm-hmm. That's what I mean by the fatal conceit, Kyle. Is the populist movements think that if they get in power, it'll never happen to them, and it's
yeah, no. Well, you have the people that are oh, well, it's not real communism, right? When they took power, then all of a sudden, you have people that are just well, the problem is that they're just not doing it right. I agree with that. Because the problem with most of these populist movements is they think that once they're in power, then just everything will be rosy, and that's a fallacy in itself too. I agree with that.
From the existentialist psychology perspective, right? It's the same thing of being oh, I can't believe that person would kill another person. How could they be so? How can somebody be born so savage and stuff like that? Without realizing that every person has a capacity to dip into that darkness, that's a fatal conceit of a lot of these populist movements.
Yeah, but because here's kind of the problem, and this is where I think that I see a disconnect with your argument, is that you're conceding that there is this darkness that just kind of exists within this apparatus, and that when people enter it, they have a chance of becoming part of this darkness. It's that's my whole issue, is that this apparatus is flawed. The apparatus is bad. It's it's not necessarily the people that go into working for the state and these institutions and stuff like that. It's that the state itself is evil. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's why I go back to the beginning, is that the populism isn't helping anything. So
it helps you boost numbers and get people in.
Yeah, it helps you express your anger, but
people from populist movements do get elected. They do enter the facility.
Yeah, do they get anything done? until they
because they need. Well, that's the thing, is that you need more numbers. Like when you have more numbers, you can get things done. Like and there's compromises that happen between that, but like when there's massive agreement in like one party and they have a massive control, then things do start to get done. You see that with like FDR, is like he got a ton of stuff done, but it's because he had a large consensus under him. And not consensus as in like Republicans siding with him. It's that he was using the energy that was going on from World War II to just pass a ton of his policies because he had a large backing behind him, because he was very much a populist figure. It's like he had the numbers on his side.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, we got a lot of unpacking to do.
Yeah. Okay.
To be continued.
Yeah. This is going to be a major contention throughout the course of many episodes on the podcast, I think. Because typically, I think that's a large thing, is that I'm much more of a cynical person and much more on the chaos end of things, and you're much more of a optimist on the side of order on things. I think that's a major difference between us, which makes for it'd be boring if we just agreed with each other on everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hopefully the audience has enjoyed our disagreement, our spirited conversation, because I definitely kind of got lost in it a little bit, and a couple points there.
We just have such different views on like a victory theory and just like what these institutions are and things like that. It's fascinating to me. I think I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of things, but I think that we've already gone way longer than I thought we would, and I think we've kind of gotten what we needed out of the video, although there's a ton of like more juicy stuff that kind of comes with it. But at our rate, we would be doing this for 4 hours. Do you have any last things that you want to say before we kind of bring this thing into a close?
I guess I'll just say I think that Kyle and I got pretty darn wonky. If you want to know more about kind of where we're coming from, because when Kyle and I are talking about a lot of these things, we're definitely alluding to a lot of like political science literature and different kind of, like Kyle mentioned, victory theory and things like that, that we're familiar with, that our audience might not be familiar with. So if you want to know more, give us a comment or a direct message, and just ask for some materials. We're glad to share. So that maybe you can get up to speed on kind of what we're talking about and the perspective that we're sharing here as well.
Well, it's also just like, we could have entire episodes on that thing. Like we'll be covering a lot of current events usually throughout the election, but like when there's not a whole lot going on, we might just dedicate entire episodes to various philosophy and political science and different concepts. We could very easily do that. But with that, I think we will kind of bring this thing into a close. This has been Acadian Driftwood, where two people that agree with each other on a lot got very heated and disagreed on everything today. So,
and we're still friends.
Peaceful dialogue. This is Acadian Driftwood. We're still kind of an upcoming podcast. We're kind of working out the kinks in our own and everything, and kind of learning how this whole thing goes. If you watched this all the way through and enjoyed it, give us a subscription on YouTube. Like the video. Do all the YouTube stuff, and give us a follow on Twitter. We'd be happy to chat with anybody. With that, any closing words, man?
Nope.
All right. See y'all.